Alright, so now we've got our home page which shows all of the podcasts that we currently have. We don't really have the notion of subscriptions or users yet, so everyone gets to see the same podcasts, but this is a good starting point nonetheless. I think the next thing we want to do is just have the ability to go to /podcasts and then /some UUID for that specific podcast, and you get greeted with all the episodes of that particular podcast. So let's think about how we would do that. I think I need to head to URLs here and create a new UUID endpoint for like a podcast detail view. So let's copy this and say podcast /UUID potentially, and then do podcast detail view as view and just call it podcast detail. I'm not sure if this is quite the right syntax, but I'm sure Django will complain if it's not. Let's go to our views, detail, import detail view, let's copy paste, podcast detail view, let's have a look in our terminal. Things look suspiciously okay. The other thing I want to do is in Django I want to define like a get absolute URL on the model. Try and find the official documentation. Get. Can't find it. Reverse lazy. Let's just assume that this works for the time being. Get absolute URL. Let's try looking in here. Model instance reference. This looks promising. Okay, yeah, so I need something like this for my podcast model. So let's try and give this a go. So we want to copy paste this example, probably go back into our models here, site podcast. We want the absolute URL for this podcast to be podcast detail. The keyword arguments, I guess, are going to be the primary key here, so let's give this a go. It doesn't like the indentation here. I don't think this needs to be imported inside here. I think maybe we're safe to do it this way. So let's just give this a go. Is there any UUID examples here? No. So now if we go to the admin page and go to a podcast and click on a podcast, there should be a little button that says like view on site, which if we click, it's going to complain because there's no podcast details as matching arguments. Okay, so let's have a look at the URL dispatcher and see if there's any examples for like UIDs in here. So there's examples of like slugs. So we've got in year. So it looks like the syntax needs to be. No, this looks right to me, I think. Although why would it complain? Instead of PK, I think this needs to just be like ID. So inside my models, I think this needs to be ID and ID. So let's save that. Refresh. It must be cool with either object PK or slug in the URL conf. So let's do. Okay, this is interesting. Django detail view for. In fact, I think this can just be PK here, and let's see what happens. Django detail view UUID, and have a look at Stack Overflow. Get object. Let's just Google this error. View must be called. Let's see what comes up. This person is saying. Maybe instead of this in my URLs, this needs to be PK. Let's see what happens. Trial and error, folks, trial and error. template does not exist. Alright, so we're good. We got there. We got there in the end. So inside templates, we want to add a file, podcast detail, HTML, and maybe we can just say object. See what happens. Awesome, that's working. So we can say extends base HTML block content end block. Refresh this page. It doesn't like that because I've missed a little %. Alright, that's working, and let's wrap this inside a container and end that. And go. Okay, let's add some padding to this as well. Is that gonna work? Nice. Okay, so I think we probably just want to steal like the card that we had from the previous one. So let's take this card here, copy that, and paste it in there. Instead of podcast, it's going to be object and object. Okay, so we have the talk Python to me, and then let's just display like a table of episodes maybe. So let's get a bootstrap and say table. Yes, I would like a table. Let's just get like a stripy table with everything. Yes, I want the table with everything. Does it give an example? Okay, yes, nice. So let's say maybe we wrap this in like a row. So this is going to be a row. Can I maybe format this a bit nicer? And then we're going to have another row. Div class equals row. I'm going to put the table in there. Refresh this. We're going to display all the episodes. Maybe the second row needs some padding as well. Cool. So instead of the numbers, we don't really care about this column. We don't really care about any of this data because we're going to loop over stuff. We don't care about this. We just want the episode, right? And that's literally it. So we can say the header is going to be the episode, and then for episode in podcast episode set. We can format all this later. We want to say end for, and we want to say episode title. It's not iterable, so maybe we have to say .all. Nice. Okay, so that seems to have worked. For some reason, this card is looking a bit funky on the previous page. You can see here. Sorry, on the home page. This is not wrapped, but then we go to a new page and it is. So there's some weirdness going on when we stick it in here, which I guess we can figure out a bit later. But what I would like to do now is just link from here to here. So we go back to podcast list. I guess we can wrap this entire element in a href, and where the href is going to be podcast or get absolute URL. Let's see if this works. So now we click that, it's going to take us to the page for that podcast. So yeah, this seems like a good a time as any to stop the recording, and I think in the next episode we'll try and make this page a bit more pretty and potentially figure out how we can play podcast episodes when we click on each one.